Victoria sat in her small room in Lagos, flipping through her church's wedding album. She had always admired the couples who got married in their church. Each wedding seemed flawless, smiling couples, glowing brides, and promises of a happy life. Her pastor often said that marrying within the church was the secret to finding a perfect spouse. Victoria believed it wholeheartedly. For years, she had imagined her own perfect day. She would walk down the aisle in a white gown, her husband waiting at the altar, promising her a life of love and joy. When she finally met Delhi, a fellow church member, she was convinced he was the answer to her prayers. But Victoria didn't know that what seemed perfect on the surface often hid something much deeper. Delhi was everything Victoria thought she wanted. He was a regular attendee at the church and part of the choir. He had a calm demeanor and spoke kindly to everyone. Their first meeting was at a youth fellowship meeting, where he volunteered to pray for the group. His words were soft but confident, and Victoria was drawn to him. Over the next few weeks, Delhi began to show interest in Victoria. They would sit together during Bible study and chat after service. Soon, Delhi asked if he could visit her family. Victoria was overjoyed. She saw this as a sign that God had ordained their relationship. Yet, in her excitement, she failed to notice the small signs that Delhi was not as open as he seemed. Delhi proposed to Victoria after just 6 months of dating. It was a simple moment after church service, with no grand gestures. He said he wanted them to serve God together as a couple. Victoria felt like her dreams were coming true. She immediately said yes, believing their love was destined to thrive. But as the weeks went by, Delhi's behavior began to change. He was less attentive, often distracted, and sometimes impatient with her. When Victoria asked what was wrong, Delhi would brush her off, saying he was busy with work and church commitments. She dismissed her doubts, reassuring herself that things would improve once they were married. Victoria threw herself into planning the wedding. Her family and church members offered their support, and she worked tirelessly to make every detail perfect. Delhi, however, seemed distant during the process. He rarely showed interest in the plans and often left decisions to her. One day, when Victoria asked Delhi to help pick their wedding colors, he responded sharply, saying it was her responsibility as the bride. She felt hurt but didn't want to argue. After all, she believed these small misunderstandings wouldn't matter once they were married. As the wedding day approached, Victoria started noticing more concerning behaviors. Delhi often spoke harshly about people in the church, calling them hypocrites. He also avoided answering questions about his past relationships, saying they didn't matter. When a close friend tried to warn Victoria about Delhi's temper, she brushed it off. "He's just stressed," Victoria said. "Marriage will bring out the best in him." But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The day finally came, and Victoria stood in front of the church, dressed in a stunning white gown. The choir sang beautifully as she walked down the aisle, her heart racing with excitement. She glanced at Delhi, who was waiting for her at the altar, looking calm and composed. The ceremony was everything Victoria had dreamed of. The pastor spoke about love, commitment, and the importance of building a marriage on faith. As they exchanged vows, Victoria felt certain this was the start of her perfect life. But even as the guests cheered and celebrated, Delhi's distant demeanor lingered in the back of her mind. The first few weeks of their marriage were pleasant but far from the bliss Victoria had imagined. Delhi was polite but not affectionate. He often spent hours on his phone or watching television, leaving little time for meaningful conversations. Victoria tried to focus on the positives. She cooked his favorite meals, kept their home tidy, and prayed for their relationship to grow stronger. But Delhi's coldness began to weigh on her. Whenever she brought up her concerns, he dismissed them, saying she was overthinking. As the months went by, the gap between them widened. Delhi started coming home late, claiming he had meetings or work obligations. He rarely attended church with her, often making excuses. Victoria felt lonely in her marriage, but she didn't want to admit it to anyone, especially not her family or church members. She confided in her best friend, Chinyere, who advised her to be patient. "Marriage is not always easy at first," Chinyere said. "Just keep praying and showing him love." Victoria clung to these words, hoping things would improve. One evening, Victoria decided to confront Deli about his late nights. She wanted to understand why he seemed so distant. Instead of answering, Deli became defensive. "Why are you always nagging me?" he snapped. "Can't you see I'm doing my best?" The argument escalated quickly, leaving Victoria in tears. Deli apologized later, blaming his temper on stress. Victoria forgave him, but the incident left a mark. She began to wonder if she truly knew the man she had married. Victoria's suspicions grew when she found a text message on Deli's phone from a woman named Funmi. The message was casual but seemed too familiar for comfort. When she asked Deli about it, he laughed it off, saying Funmi was just a colleague. Though Deli's explanation sounded reasonable, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. She prayed fervently for clarity, asking God to reveal the truth. Little did she know, the truth would soon begin to unravel in ways she never expected. Over time, Victoria noticed more red flags. Deli became secretive about his finances, refusing to discuss their budget or share details about his income. He also avoided attending family gatherings, giving vague excuses about being too busy. One day, while cleaning their room, Victoria stumbled upon an old photograph of Deli with another woman. The photo was tucked away in a drawer, along with a letter that suggested a serious relationship. When she confronted Deli, he brushed it off, claiming it was from his past and didn't matter anymore. Victoria tried to believe him, but her trust in him began to erode. She started questioning everything she thought she knew about her husband. The strain in their marriage began to affect Victoria's mental health. She felt isolated and ashamed, unable to confide in her church community. She feared being judged or told she hadn't prayed enough. Victoria tried to focus on her work and hobbies, but the loneliness was overwhelming. She started to realize that her idea of a perfect marriage had been based on appearances rather than reality. Victoria decided to seek advice from her pastor. She hoped he could offer wisdom and guidance to help salvage her marriage. During their meeting, she hesitated to reveal too much, fearing judgment. Instead, she asked general questions about handling marital challenges. The pastor reminded her of the importance of patience and prayer. "Marriage is a journey," he said. "Both partners must be willing to work together. Have you talked openly with Deli about your concerns?" Victoria nodded but didn't share the full extent of her struggles. She left the meeting feeling slightly encouraged but still unsure of how to address the deeper issues. One evening, Victoria decided to approach Deli with an open heart. She spoke calmly about her feelings of loneliness and her desire to work on their relationship. Deli listened but offered little in response. "I don't know what you expect from me," he said, shrugging. This response crushed Victoria. She realized that while she was willing to fight for their marriage, Deli seemed indifferent. That night, she prayed more earnestly than ever, asking God for strength and wisdom to navigate her situation. A few weeks later, Victoria noticed changes in Deli's routine. He began receiving more phone calls late at night and leaving home without explanation. One evening, her curiosity got the better of her, and she checked his phone again. This time, she found a series of messages from Funmi that were undeniably romantic. Victoria felt her world crumble. She had suspected something was wrong, but seeing the evidence hurt more than she imagined. She confronted Deli, who reacted with anger. "You had no right to go through my phone," he shouted. Though Deli tried to turn the blame on her, Victoria finally saw the truth. Her perfect marriage was far from what she had imagined. Victoria called Chinyere the next day and shared everything. For the first time, she allowed herself to cry openly about her pain. Chinyere listened quietly and then advised her to take things one step at a time. "You need to decide what's best for you," Chinyere said. "Marriage is important, but so is your peace of mind. Don't ignore your happiness for the sake of appearances." Victoria knew her friend was right, but the idea of making a big decision scared her. She wondered how her church and family would react if they knew the truth. During a Sunday service, the pastor preached about honesty and transparency in relationships. His words struck a chord with Victoria. She realized she had been pretending everything was fine while silently suffering. After the service, an older woman from the congregation approached her. "I've been watching you, my dear," the woman said. "You look troubled. Remember, God gives us the strength to face our trials, no matter how hard they seem." Victoria thanked her but didn't share her struggles. Yet, the woman's words stayed with her, giving her a sense of hope. One day, while running errands, Victoria ran into Funmi. The meeting was accidental, but it left Victoria shaken. Funmi recognized her immediately and introduced herself casually. Victoria, caught off guard, struggled to respond. As they spoke, Victoria sensed that Funmi was aware of her relationship with Deli. Funmi's tone was polite but carried an air of confidence that made Victoria feel small. After the encounter, Victoria realized she could no longer avoid confronting the reality of her marriage. Feeling overwhelmed, Victoria decided to speak with a marriage counselor. She hoped a neutral party could help her understand what went wrong and how to move forward. The counselor listened carefully as Victoria poured out her heart. "You can't fix a marriage alone," the counselor said gently. "Both partners need to be willing to put in the effort. If Deli isn't ready to work with you, you may need to consider other options." Though the advice was hard to hear, it gave Victoria clarity. She began to see that her happiness and self-worth couldn't depend on someone who wasn't willing to change. After the counseling session, Victoria spent days reflecting on her life and the choices that brought her to this point. She looked through her wedding album and noticed something she hadn't seen before: Deli's distant expression in nearly every photo. It dawned on her that she had been so focused on the idea of a perfect marriage that she overlooked the cracks forming even before they said "I do." She realized she had ignored her instincts and warnings from others because she was too invested in the image of what her marriage should be. This realization brought a mix of sadness and resolve. Victoria knew she needed to make decisions that prioritized her emotional and spiritual well-being. One evening, Victoria decided it was time to have an honest conversation with Deli. She prepared herself emotionally, knowing it could go in any direction. "Deli," she began softly, "I can't keep pretending that things are okay between us. I know about Funmi. I know you've been distant and unhappy. I need to understand what you want from this marriage." Deli looked at her, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "I don't know," he admitted. "Maybe we rushed into this. Maybe we wanted something neither of us was ready for." Though his words stung, they also confirmed what Victoria had feared. They had built their marriage on shaky ground, and now it was beginning to collapse. Victoria took some time away from Deli to clear her head. She visited her parents' home, where she found comfort in familiar surroundings. Her mother noticed her quiet demeanor but didn't press her for details. Instead, she encouraged Victoria to take things one day at a time. During this period, Victoria spent hours in prayer and reflection. She asked God for guidance and clarity. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of peace, even amid the turmoil. While at her parents' home, Victoria met with an old friend who shared surprising information about Deli's past. According to her friend, Deli had been in a long-term relationship with Funmi before they got married. The relationship had ended abruptly, but it seemed the two had never truly let go of each other. Hearing this confirmed what Victoria had suspected. Deli had not been honest with her from the start. Though the revelation hurt, it also gave her a clearer picture of the challenges in their marriage. When Victoria returned home, Deli was waiting for her. He admitted that he had been seeing Funmi and apologized for betraying her trust. "I didn't mean for things to happen this way," he said. "I thought I could move on, but I was wrong." Victoria listened quietly, her emotions a mix of anger, sadness, and relief. Though his confession didn't erase the pain, it gave her the closure she needed to make her next move. After much prayer and reflection, Victoria decided to separate from Deli. It wasn't an easy choice, but she knew she couldn't continue in a marriage built on dishonesty and emotional neglect. She informed Delhi of her decision, and though he expressed regret, he didn't fight it. "Maybe this is for the best," he said. Victoria moved back to her parents' home temporarily, determined to rebuild her life. Victoria dreaded the reaction of her church community. She expected judgment and whispers, but to her surprise, many members expressed support. Some women even confided their own struggles, admitting that their marriages were far from perfect. This outpouring of honesty reminded Victoria that no one's life is as flawless as it seems. She began to let go of her shame and embrace her truth. Victoria found a job as a school administrator, which gave her a sense of purpose. She also joined a women's support group, where she met others who had faced similar challenges. Through these connections, Victoria began to rediscover her strength and self-worth. She realized that her identity wasn't tied to her marriage but to her faith, resilience, and ability to grow. Looking back, Victoria recognized the mistakes she had made. She had placed too much trust in appearances and ignored the importance of truly knowing her partner before marriage. She also learned that marriage alone couldn't guarantee happiness. Real love required honesty, effort, and mutual respect, things her relationship with Delhi lacked. Months later, Victoria attended a church seminar on relationships. She shared her story with the group, hoping it would help others avoid the same pitfalls. Her courage inspired many, and she received heartfelt messages of gratitude. Victoria began to see her experience not as a failure but as a stepping stone toward a better future. Victoria eventually found peace in her new life. Though she wasn't ready to consider another relationship, she was open to the possibility of love when the time was right. Her journey taught her the value of patience, self-awareness, and building relationships on a strong foundation. Victoria realized that true happiness came not from chasing perfection but from embracing life's imperfections with faith and courage. And so, with hope in her heart, Victoria moved forward, ready to face whatever the future held. Thank you for watching. Kindly like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more videos.